And I'm sharing the link on the public chat for the YouTube Live. I would like to share it with your colleague.
Perfect. So if this is the first time that you're joining us this week, a few logistics, and Alicia, please fill in the ones that I'm definitely going to miss. Welcome to our own Brilliant Labs meeting platform created by our architect, Josiah. I wonder if he appreciates being called an architect. He'll be joining us, unless he's already on, he may be, but if you have any technical issues, you can feel free to private message him just by clicking on his name, Josiah, as a user and sending him a quick note. You should be able to resolve any audio or video issues simply by refreshing your browser page that you're in right now, or by using some of the blue buttons down at the bottom. At any time you can leave the audio, which will then give you an opportunity to rejoin. Your microphone is automatically muted as you join this session. This is a coffee and conversation show, so we encourage you to share. We are very open to you cutting us off. All three of us enjoy talking, and so we encourage you to cut us off and share your thoughts as we discuss these ideas of scaling creativity and ideation through schools and communities with an administrator perspective.
And feel free to share about yourself, introduce who you are, where you're joining us from, and a bit about the role. And you can also unmute your mic and feel free to come on the camera if you would like. This is very much of a conversation, not like just one-way listening thing. So we would encourage you to just share and don't hesitate.
We also love taking selfies. It's been really neat when all of these little webcam screens have been turned on and we're able to capture that. Of course, we won't post those publicly unless we have your explicit permission to do so. So feel free, join. All right, so it is 11:31. Welcome to Brilliant Labs Professional Learning. Today's topic, or this half-hour topic, and we'll stick around a little bit at the end if you would like to continue, is all about scaling creativity across your school and throughout your community. Whether that community is a wing of your school, the entire school, or more appropriately used in the context of the community in which your school is situated. My name is Jacob Lingley. I've been here with you at Brilliant Labs for what seems like a brilliant eternity of 5 years, and there's no end in sight to the collaboration as we travel throughout Atlantic Canada. I'm the Director of Instructional Design, and I'm pleased and thrilled to be joined here with my colleagues. Natasha, if you would love to introduce yourself.
I'm Natasha. I've been with Brilliant Labs for a year and a half and a school teacher. I've been working as a school teacher for the past 15 years.
What's your morning beverage of choice? How do you take your coffee this morning?
Oh, I was at the campground this morning, which was a beautiful sun. So I had my coffee outside with my nice smell of the flowers, and I had a nice espresso.
Ooh, look at you. Very fancy. And my colleague Alicia, the newest member to join Brilliant Labs, but no stranger to the activity at Brilliant Labs. Glad to have you here on board.
It's great to be here. I was just thinking, how long has it been? I guess I'm going to complete 3 months. It's not there yet, but so join at a time when things were changing in the world, but fortunate enough to be surrounded by amazing people at the Brilliant Lab and be energized. My background is in design and education from India, USA, and I guess now here in Brazil a bit. So I'm looking forward to this session.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. Alicia, I don't know why you weren't moderator here. While I just continue a little bit with this intro, I wonder if someone can add the worksheet to the shared screen. Natasha has created these, just this area to reflect and to capture some notes if you feel like printing them or looking at them. We have been talking a lot about the design thinking process, and just as a little bit of an activity, if any of you would like to turn your microphone on, rather than digging into the role of creativity within a pedagogical environment or an instructional environment in your school, why don't we think of how creative you have been with your coffee making? So, for instance, I'll start. I have not been very creative at all this morning. Out of necessity, we have a Keurig machine for when those mornings are very active. And so I had to rely on not taking solace in my routine of making the coffee. My routine this morning was jam that pot in, hit the button as fast as I can, and get that cup of coffee. How did you start your coffee this morning? Feel free to turn on your microphone and share. This is also really cold right now. Alicia, you were a little creative in your coffee. I know you're not a habitual coffee drinker, but yesterday, what was that you did?
Give me. So sorry, I was just trying to pause the presentation. No, I don't drink coffee. I'm very much of a tea drinker. I guess I generally like start with water, but sometimes I drink tea. And yesterday I just mixed tea and coffee. My husband is a coffee drinker, and I'm a tea drinker, just to experiment. And I realized, like, I think there was a flavor in Starbucks like that, like chai latte or something, which has like a bit of tea in the coffee. Wasn't as bad.
There you go.
I was smart. I moved my coffee maker right next to me in my kitchen, so I don't even have to get up. You can't tell. I can make a brand new hot coffee while I'm still having these coffee and conversations. And I see a lot of people joined with just a headset, and feel free to turn on your microphones, because it is really a conversation we are looking to have. And I know as school leaders or administrators, you are often very busy. So allow yourself to give yourself the time to just sit and reflect, and how to scale creativity within your school and your community, and share us your ideas that you have. And we will talk about the processes and how process can be depending on one community and different in another, but what will work for you and what were your successes. And then we can always guide ourselves through your sharings.
As many of you are educators yourselves, you'll likely appreciate that we've been speaking to teachers all this week about the role of design, creativity, innovation, making, and how it brings opportunities. And it has brought opportunities in learning for hundreds of years, and it will continue despite the current situation. We are very empathetic to your position in that oftentimes classroom teachers, parents, individuals who are not administrators feel that administrators are putting some additional constraints on the role of creativity in the building. And we, at any point in this, if you feel like sharing your perspective, we are very empathetic to understand that often you are not the ones that implement the constraints or the opportunities. You know, you are but part of a very large system, a very large community. And we would love to know your perspectives on the role of design and creativity, ideation in your professional responsibilities.
And also about this scaling creativity. When we were preparing all these handouts for the teachers, as you can see, Alicia put the one we prepared for today. And it's really having this reflection of what is our role. And with our coffee and conversations, we've been playing around with what is coffee's role in today's world. You know, there's over 200 billion cups drank each day, and none of them are made the same way or taste the same or have the same rituals linked to them. So that's where we have to always give ourselves the key. What's your key to success to make awesome projects in your schools, or have this creative leadership in your school? And here you'll see on the handout, it's Starbucks mission for equity coffee. But if we take it to Brilliant Labs vision, or to your school's vision, to what is equity in education? How can we have and help our students and work with our families, because we are all linked together? And what can we reflect on to make sure that we do move on? And, you know, looking back, Alicia always says, I love this, looking back at what was done and when we look forward at what can be done now to work together.
And I guess it's also about envisioning, like, where do you see like equity, design thinking, creativity happening in where you work? One of the things that I've been a teacher, mostly like middle school grades, and in that school, I guess one thing that was part of that I felt was helpful was two things. One was this like morning ritual, like that would happen where everybody would gather within the classroom, like either we we call it mandala creation, like either meditation or just like a group circle and meeting, talking about not necessarily like the course content, but just something about that's happening in the morning or what happened yesterday. So like kind of not separating the school life with home life, but bringing that element and valuing that. And the other thing that I noticed worked was this collaboration across different grades. So if you go and ask a third grader to give you like a school tour, and the third grader will take you to all these classes and let you like share with you what's happening in that class. And one way that was possible was about, I guess each class shared like some representative from like grade 1, even kindergarten, to just have like the student collective every week meeting where they would share about what's happening in their class. And that's where like the students kind of had this autonomy of the school and a powerful role. And I guess those two things kind of stayed with me. Not happened at many schools, but I guess that's what something I remember. Is like one way I wish, like, what if this happened in all the other schools? This collaboration across grades, but also bridging the home life and school life.
I love that you said what if, and we've been talking a lot about the influence around those two words, what if. It's almost as if we're ignoring the constraints just for a moment to explore a vision, and and to allow ourselves to take the time to explore that vision. And I love that many of the teachers that we've shared conversations with this week have allowed that permission to come in the form of their own passions that they have in their own lives. I shared just the other day that I have very few skills in carpentry, but I've been exploring with my daughter, who's 2 years old, making little pressure-treated lumber pathways in our backyards. And I've been thinking, if I was in the mathematics classroom, whether virtual, remote, or, how would I use that opportunity of which I am passionate right now in my own life to spark some creative exploration for my own teachings. And so then how does that translate into, if I bring that into my teaching, my professional capacity, how does that translate into my school's vision for instructional reform or an instructional culture and our vision, and how does that relate to the larger community?
I like that we always come back to the reflection part and the collaboration, which are two big factors in all of this creativity and scaling that we want to have within our school systems. And I remind myself of when I was in the classroom and I was going to school every day, my favorite moments in my 15 years as a teacher where I was with my colleagues were those morning coffees where we would gather around in the teacher's lounge and have our morning coffees. Is there such a ritual in your school? How can we integrate that ritual and open for those collaboration and giving us time to just talk and create relationships? And it's also bringing to the point of the coffee shops. When we think of the coffee shops, people go there to just gather and talk. So how can we bring that into a teacher's lounge and offer these reflections by even just having a word as a prompt? What can you do in your school as a leader, to give the time to your teachers to reflect and collaborate in a non-structured way also? Because we know there's those TAF meetings and there the principal gives a lot of information, but is there time for reflection? Is there time for everybody to just sit and reflect and not necessarily share? Are we taking time to have those silences and reflect on what was just said and absorb without judgment and being open to everybody's opinion?
we've started to play quite a bit as an organization on using familiar materials to provoke creative conversations. And just the other day, we were thinking about the role of staff room engagement, the conversations that happen there. And it's a great social opportunity, as long as educators remain 6 feet apart right now, to explore these blending of worlds between personal and professional. And it's always been, perhaps there are some conversations that are less constructive than others, but we've started to really play around the role of materials just being at disposal. And we'd like to help you out with this. If you're interested in exploring this, next year, what would a miniature maker space look like in your on your staff room table? How could we curate markers and highlighters and post-it notes and create a little instance of creative collaboration, in your staff room? We've been playing quite a bit around with the idea of hexagons, and how hexagons can be really playful in solving problems. I don't know if there are hexagonal post-it notes, but I sure hope there are. Maybe we'll have to create some this summer. But we've been playing, and Natasha, with the hexagons here, and with the design thinking process. And so, let's say you have you're trying to find a creative solution with your teachers to distribute that leadership for how you're going to tackle, lunchtime supervision, or maybe that's a boring context to use these hexagons, But we've been taking them, using them, and turning them around, and they tessellate together, right? And so, how can we play with color and this problem space in a very playful way? And what would that look like? Or Lego, or yarn, or felt, to be put in your staff rooms to engage some creative play with ideas.
And I guess I want to mention, as you're sharing this, I mean, sometimes there's a misconception about that. Even though the makerspace is a playful thing, it's only for students. But I guess that's another thing. You can't separate the teaching from learning, or learning from teaching. They're kind of very much interconnected. So when we talk about playfulness or bringing these elements, I guess the role of teacher is also a learner, especially in the times, I guess not just now, but even before or in the future. Things change, the content change, the things are like changing very fast compared to what it used to be. And I guess it's kind of impossible to keep pace with everything. However, there are certain things that are timeless. So this element of playfulness, this element of teachers being the learners, being experimental, trying things out. I guess if there's an opportunity for that, even a little bit, as you said, like, few minutes in a day or something, I guess it would, like that, I see like could be an interesting thing to try. And I wonder what people's thoughts are on teachers as tinkerers or experimental or makers. People have any ideas about, like, in general, like, where do you see this happening, or some constraints that you anticipate might happen? Would you like to share that? You can use the public chat, or even just unmute your microphone if you would like. If you're having some technical issues, just let us know, and we can resolve that.
One of the ideas here that Lisa mentioned, these unplanned conversations, that fits in, how do you capture those unplanned moments? The times that you have the what if, those aesthetic reactions to, holy, that's a really neat idea. So to have those materials around to capture that, index cards, post-it notes, and a communal place that you can reflect on them.
see Jennifer shared in the chat that they're having a lot of discussion, and I've been hearing a lot of comments coming from teachers and that principals on this is, okay, we have these maker spaces and we have all these materials, but how can we get around sharing these items? Mm-hmm. So we really have to start looking at next year very differently, because we can't share all of our materials. So what will your materials list look like for your students next year? How will the budget, that's something that principals can play around with. How will the budget be divided? Will you have to make changes on there to see differently? So we're looking to get your ideas here, just to get some sense of community and some sense of collaboration within the principal leadership roles, to have this, okay, what are we going to do with our makerspace? So we have one 3D printer. Well, who's your teacher that uses it the most? Get it in that, maybe in that class for a month. All teachers are not using the materials at the same time. I know, like, I use my 3D printer mostly in December. That was my month. So I just only needed it in December. My sewing machine was March and April. Those were my 2 big sewing months. Well, the other times I did not necessarily need to have it in my class. So it has to be a big change of perspective, because I know when you were saying, Jacob, like having all these Post-it and markers in the school for teachers to share, I can just see myself, not myself, but I had some colleagues that I called squirrels, because they'd get there and they'd see all the markers and Post-its, like, ooh, cool stuff, and they'd bring that in their class. So how do we move away from having the squirrels and having people collaborate? So how do we get that in our teachers' perspective that, okay, I'm in a project application with Brilliant Labs. The 3D printer is supposed to be in my class, but how can we share that? Can we create a way to this collaboration within our schools? And that's one thing that I liked having my materials in my class, but anybody could always come in and take my materials, because they were not necessarily me that paid it with my money, that it was there within my class. Yes, it was a project application, but it was also for student use and teacher use. And this collaboration to me was always open. But how do we change that mindset also in our schools to have teachers willing to share these materials? So what can we, with our leadership roles, how can we influence that?
And I like that sometimes, and there are different things of sharing, right? Like the constraints about the accessibility, how much do we have and how we share it across. And now the other question is, now we have, but how do we share it across in a safe manner? How do we sanitize those things? And I guess these constraints also give you more opportunities to explore. But as you mentioned, Natasha, like the community or communal approach is like so important. So if it's a matter of like, oh, we have only one 3D printer, can some students take charge of like, and create like a service for others? Like they are in charge of the thing and they take care of their own PPE or personal protective gears and like print for others. And that kind of builds, like, as you mentioned, these relationships. So kind of that constraints that you have, that still can create opportunities. And imagine like what kind of things would learn, like students would learn. They could learn how to run your own service, how to respond to the needs, and how to plan. How will they manage their time? But I guess there's autonomy for them. And similarly, some teachers can take charge of like different things for like, maybe today I'm the one who's gonna take care of 3D printing things. So if you have something, just let me know. And come up with a system. Maybe there's like a common board next to the 3D printer where people can like share it. Maybe there's a ballot box where you can submit your request. Maybe it's online. And in the terms of sanitation, I was listening to the natural making conversation, and I love this idea of bucket. So like each student having some kind of like their own mini maker kit. And the thing is, it can be about these things that we provide. It can be about they can bring like their own cardboard or some kind of like opportunities that they see around. And since they're the one only using it, that kind of solves this problem about like the common sharing materials. So kind of like consumables and reusables. So consumables, things that you use it for in project, can be in the kit, like pom-pom balls or thread or paper. And reusable, as you're seeing, like a 3D printer or microcontroller, maybe there is a creative way to think about like how that can happen if you imagine what the system would look like, and that give us interesting ways to think about those systems.
We were having that same conversation yesterday here in the makerspace at Superior. And it's like, how do we go about getting kids to use the equipment? So some of the things that we talked about too were with this other teacher and I, for example, the t-shirt press. I said, somebody could be using the t-shirt press while someone else might be using the vinyl cutter or doing other things. So when you're designing projects for your, with your kids in mind and with the makerspace in mind, it's not about getting all the kids to use the microbit at the same time or all the kids to use the makey at the same time. You're not teaching how to use the tool. So for example, we have sign-out boxes for microbits and makeys. When kids are working on projects, if they're doing something interactive and they need a makey, they sign that kit out and they take it back to their classroom with them. And that's the kit that they use. So that's an idea too, if you're worried about sanitation. But again, it's getting that mindset that you're not getting all the kids on the same tools all at the same time, and look at a way how you can sanitize some of that stuff, just with even Lysol wipes on handles or whatever, those types of things. So it's being creative in your project design.
Lisa, you bring up a really powerful point about empowerment and maker empowerment for students, for teachers, for everyone. And we've always been kind of playing these two roles here at Brilliant Labs, where we really love materials and the power of materials, from the pom-pom ball to the virtual reality headset, because those are the materials that our makers use to create what it is that they love. But the process by which they use those materials really is what fascinates us. I mean, from speaking for myself, like, you always have, you hear these great plans of what students and teachers, want to do, but it doesn't matter if they ever get there. It's that process that they take. I see many of our maker spaces, like you're talking about, the one station at a time, that's still going to happen. What's so important is that we retain the conversation about the design that the students are taking, the plan, the journey that they're taking, and allow them to find that empowerment in the journey. And the tools are still there and the materials are still there, but they may be being used in a very different way at very different times. And I love what you're talking about, Alicia, with creating a system of organizing. And we know, science has told us how long an active virus, can stay present on a surface. And so if we are truly concerned about that, how beautiful would it be to create this visual platform, the schedule in which students can be in control of moving around these pieces, and okay, this material cannot be used for these 2 days. That can be a visual chunk that they integrate into that timetable. But while those 2 days, that just provides an opportunity for the students to really explore the empathy of the project that while they're awaiting.
And I guess whatever forms or processes happen, setting the culture is important. The culture of resilience, the culture of respect, the culture of sharing. And I guess I envision that, maybe at the beginning of the school years, those things, if we are all creative, that's one way, because young people adapt faster than all of us, I think. I guess we have these constraints, like there might be this problem, but I guess, which is why the first few days, setting up that culture is really important, where students and adults, teachers can practice that flexibility, but also this awareness and safety and mindfulness around these things. And when that culture happens, like it happens with a person, you transfer that to somebody else, people get inspired. But if a lot of people start doing it, that comes across whole school. And that's where the system can get defined. So I guess we have to think about these small changes that can lead to bigger changes, rather than have these fixed set of mind and impose it directly. You can have a framework that has certain things that shouldn't be changed, but then something that have flexibility, so must do and can do. So there's still autonomy, but there's a framework just to guide that process.
I was thinking back to the claymation example and the stop motion that we talked about earlier this morning in the previous session. And I thought, you have a bucket of clay and modeling, those kind of tools. Well, if you have someone that can help distribute that or be the distributor of those supplies, and it's like, really, students can look and say, okay, well, I need red, blue, green, purple to create whatever it is I'm making. So someone could be in charge of doing and cutting and giving the sizes instead of saying, okay, here, just everybody go and grab. So it's almost like you could do a purchasing type thing where you have kids saying, I've got popsicle sticks as my money to buy pom-poms and tools and that stuff. So not everybody would be dipping into the shared items, but you could have a teacher distributing. Kids need to really know what it is, what materials they need to work with, and it'll help them to develop some skills in that aspect. Just some ideas.
I'm being mindful of time. Thank you, Lisa. Natasha, you did this incredible activity that really brought out the creativity of our participants yesterday. And I'm curious if this would be useful here to really dig into the extent of such a small object. So yesterday we used an orange. I just literally looked around me and I've got this can. It has things in it. Could we, just with this can, what if this can was the only material that we had for our students, for our teachers to work with for a month? What's everything that what are all the learning opportunities that we could think of, independent of the subject area? Let's not worry about it. How could we be as creative as possible with this can? And you can use the public chat now am I butchering this activity?
No, yesterday we had 31 ideas with the orange within 3 minutes. How can teachers use that one can as a teaching prompt or a tool for the students next year?
And if you want to look at it closely, you can just, there's a pop-up thing next to Jacob's screen, so you can see his video like bigger. So if you would like to see the cam close, Jacob, would you mind doing that demo with the cam again so people can see what they're looking at? So yeah, just a pop-up thing, like 4 arrows. Just if you click on it, you'll be able to see it in a bigger screen.
Oh my, I didn't clean it. That's all right. Okay, so thinking about all of the learning opportunities that we have in this can, right here, this can alum. Hide a mystery object in it. Shake it. Get kids writing. What could be in it?
I guess the emulsion and solvent. I was looking at like what they used to print on that can, kind of like paint. So I guess thinking about how we can get rid of that could introduce emulsion and solvents in a good way. Like what kind of things are there?
Yeah. So, what kind of chemical reaction, will we need? It's interesting. One of our Maker Fun activities was to reuse the seeds from some of our fruits and vegetables. Can this become a plant pot? Can we create an entire garden? Would this be a good plant pot for a succulent?
It can be about finding similar cans and looking at systems and mathematics, things that makes it different, and like have multiple cans that are similar or different, like sets and patterns. Could be an interesting thing.
I'm curious. I see the HomeSense label on it. What kind of transportation did it take to get this can to HomeSense? Never mind to my house, and then a specialty machine to use this. Was it a sustainable method of transportation? What are the geographic, the socio-political roles of me purchasing this to get it to my students to use?
Can the can talk? Can we make the can to talk? Or play music as you do?
I know what you said yesterday also. What if this can was a person? How would you describe it? Like write the portrait of the can. What could be its personality? What do you think is reflecting on that can? I also loved what Lisa said also about science, reflect the light from different angles.
maybe it's a window into my own self, a version of myself, because I look at it and my face is all skewed. It's a lot thinner than in real life, actually. A prompt for creative writing, a carbon footprint of the can.
You can create a pinhole camera with the can.
There we are.
You could, we see drawing it, but you can also draw it and see all the angles and the reflections on it. If you add something in the can one day, can you draw it and what's inside and how the object inside the can looks different from the object outside the can?
I guess I'm still thinking like if we use this as a what if scenario, like what if a can save or can do this? What if the can solve food security? What if, I mean, I don't know, there are multiple things.
Well, what's interesting with all of these what if moments is that we're presenting topics that transcend the borders of any subject area or grade level, right? They are truly not only interdisciplinary, but we're exploring some huge concepts in teaching and learning and pedagogy. And they're timeless, like you said, Alicia, at the beginning of the session. Now we do have a captive audience here of, there's 18 users, there's 3 of us on screen. We're not naive to know that in a classroom situation of 28 learners, from the middle school, and then with social distancing, there are a lot of constraints. But those constraints do present more opportunities, more what if moments in which your teams of teachers, can take a very collaborative look at maybe not curriculum alignments, but the opportunities that come from misalignments that they see of using a can. There are no curriculum documents out there that say use a can to personify human emotions. And I keep considering the opportunities that school administrators, teachers, our students are going to be up against as we re-enter in fall 2020. And how can we live just for a moment in those opportunities and explore interdisciplinarity, explore, 1 month. I'm trying to capture your emotions yesterday, Natasha. 1 month of 31 ideas that came up with an orange, and create lessons not around this, but around our emotions and our experiences that we're having. Oh, you're still creating ideas here? Can it become a time capsule?
And it's really, again, changing that mindset. And same as our collaborative teachers, and I see a lot of principals out there and a lot of school leaders all trying to find solutions by themselves. A lot of time with their staff and sharing with others. So it's working together as a community. There are so many great ideas everywhere. Like there must be, we can say, well, we got to figure out a way to sanitize, but everybody's working on the same problem. Where are we sharing all these ideas? Who is like listening to all the principles and the different perspectives? It's important to get those ideas out there and take the time to see what's our process going to be, and what's going to work for us within our school is not going to be the same thing from the other school also, but to gather from their ideas, maybe that what they had as materials and what they did, and build on there. We talk about reinventing the wheel, and yes, we can with students reinvent the wheel because they'll learn something from it, but also we have to take the time to learn that and take the time to collaborate and listen and just sit and talk about this discussion and find a solution. And we can collaborate within schools and within communities, and my high school with your high school together, and it's taking that time to do it.
One of the great opportunities that this pandemic has presented is the dissolving of geographic barriers through virtual means. And schools are going to, we discovered that as an organization. We knew it was going to have an influence, but it had such an influence on our work. Schools are going to discover that if they haven't already. And then the connections within the community, those geographic barriers, even within your own community of getting people in, it can be really expressive to invite those community members in to become a greater part of your instructional culture at your school?
I'm curious to just like if people who are there can like describe maybe in a word or sentence or more, but just like what's on your mind when you're thinking about the near future? What's like what are you thinking about? Could be a word, could be a sentence. It's really important for us to hear from you, just to see like what's going on. And it could be something that you imagine. It could be just something that you're thinking about when you envision the fall 2020. Could be a question. And as you're thinking about it, you can also think about, as Natasha mentioned, like what has happened before. Like think about like in the past 3 months. Maybe some of those things can inform what's going to happen in the future. Once we address it, I guess that's when we can. Somebody mentioned like once you name it, you can like resolve it. So I guess that's very important, just to like see what are those things. Lisa says, what if staff meetings were all started with the same type of exercise?
And I was going to offer, we would love to be able to offer a simple, I know we've taken, more than a half an hour, but even 5 minutes at the start of your staff meetings. We would love to be able to guide a conversation just involving a can or whatever. Maybe that's the challenge. You only have 30 centimeters in front of you to select an object.
Mm-hmm. In our design school, we had this activity where somebody would bring a picture or like some object every day. And I guess that was more of from the literacy point of view exercise, but it would be in the center. And then everybody would just write, like, kind of give it a title, like whatever they see. I think that was like the picture is worth 1,000 words, but it was amazing how everybody had like different interpretation. And I guess the more times you do it, you kind of get more, it's an interesting way to stretch and explore, as they call it. I'm sure like if you now think about the orange, it would be more than 31 ideas, right?
Well, it's a great way to abstract yourself from your professional obligations and then reflect on those abstractions that you've had, right? You're not constrained by any due dates or any curricular outcomes or any district improvement plan. You're just living in that moment in creating a title of the picture that you're using, and then we reflecting on, okay, are there any implications there, any correlations, any analogies, metaphors that we can relate back to our immediate professional decision?
One of the other story that I remember, so we had this teacher, and I was asking about like some creative project to do, like make it, and all of us as students were really stuck because we didn't know what he meant, and like he didn't give any guidelines. That was the thing. Like we didn't know, and like how do we know what we are creating? And I guess it didn't work. Nobody said anything for like 2 days, and Thursday he comes and he brings this project that he made. And I guess he was such a good designer, but he did it on purpose that he made it look really crappy, and brought it all of us and says like, okay, just you are the critiquing, like, so just like give me some feedback. How can I make this better? And that's when I guess all of us started thinking about from a different perspective about, oh, you can do this. And I guess as we were giving him feedback, we were informing our own ideas for what we could do. So that's another thing I like about these changing roles. Why teachers have to give feedback all the time? Can students like how about you sharing and then students commenting? And that's the way they can think about what they could do. Kind of like this remix approach. You share something and then I guess that's where ideas like develop. So if teachers started sharing, and not sharing in the sense like students think of it as an ultimate and like make exactly the same thing, but more as a way, like a starting point.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, Alicia, and we're going to use that as a segue to push the pause button on this conversation. And Alicia had mentioned sharing. We would love to work with you as you have these types of conversations, either formal or informal. We are here to help. We have an amazing team of pedagogues, of educators, throughout Atlantic Canada, who are used to working with constraints. And so please feel free to reach out to us via email or Twitter or any of those social medias. We're not on TikTok, but feel free to reach out. This afternoon, we have another session actually starting at 1 o'clock, 2 sessions starting at 1. So regrettably, we're not going to be able to stay around for the after party that usually happens at these conversations. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and Brilliant Labs is not going anywhere in the fall. In fact, we are just ramping up for a very busy and new form of summer camps happening across Atlantic Canada, both virtual and physical. So thanks to all of you for joining us. Best of luck as you continue to plan for the return of students in fall 2020. And for those of you who are encountering a heat wave today, please stay cool.
Thank you, everybody. Jacob, I should remind you to stop the recording.
Yes, so we don't lose it. Here we are.
Also, people might feel more comfortable now.
Both live stream and recording